impulses are being redirected. We are living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep.
Oh, goddamn hacker, that second damn night that asshole's cut in.
The movement was begun 8 months ago by a small group of scientists who discovered, quite by accident, these signals being sent through time.
Us took the hackers months to figure out how to do this.
The poor and the underclass are growing. Racial justice and human rights are non-existent. They have created a repressive society, and we are their unwitting accomplices. Their intention to rule rests with the annihilation of consciousness. We have been lulled into a trance. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain. Please understand, they are safe as long as they are not discovered. That is their primary method of survival. Keep us asleep, keep us selfish, keep us sedated.
They're pulling the water out of the sand.
Ah, yes. That was a clip from one of the great modern Gnostic gospels of our time, and greatest of sci-fi flicks, as well as an accurate treatise on what's happening today. What has always been reality. So accurate, it's amazing more people aren't wearing those glasses Roddy Piper donned in the film. Wake up, people, because the end is near, and it's not damnation that's coming. It's pure ignorance and bone-crunching numbness, until you become nothing more than a dead machine, a pathetic, soulless slave.
What truth? That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage. Born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind.
The movie I'm talking about is, of course, They Live by John Carpenter. And we'll be discussing in this eternal now, this Sethian gem, as well as so many other movies and their secret meaning and occult allegory and even predictive programming, as well as the minds behind them. That will be easy and revelatory and liberating, as once again we're joined and graced by Robert Sullivan, who arrives this time to the virtual Alexandria to discuss his new book, Cinema Symbolism 2, More Esoteric Imagery in Popular Movies. But before, please allow me to introduce myself and where exactly you are as you finally become the director of your movie instead of a walk-on part in a B movie made by hating angels.
This is blasphemy! This is madness!
Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio, always broadcast through the God Above God Dad Cam. We don't take prisoners but liberate them. We are not the final authority on anything, but hope to be an endless possibility for everything, including helping you screenwrite a future you always deserved. This is the greatest adventure you've ever been on, finding out who you really are and where you fit in the eternal cosmic battle of light and darkness, on par in importance as a battle between Tommy Shaw and Dennis DeYoung for the soul of the band Styx. Divided we stand, together we rise.
There's a conflict in every human heart between the rational and the irrational, between good and evil. And good does not always triumph. Sometimes the dark side overcomes what Lincoln called the better angels of our nature.
And yes, I am Abraxas in his meat sack incarnation of Miguel Condor, broadcasting from the lawful but, well, not frigid but actually warm dystopia of Chicago, as it is July, the year of our demiurge 2017. And it's even warmer as Illinois collapses as a state into a banana republic thanks to Jehovah's greedy minions. I am your pompatus of gnosis, and so are you, as your feedback, support, and company make a terrible God above God as the ancients knew you. Thank you for being here, oh you veterans of 1,000 psychic wars, as together we set the controls to the heart of the sun, the heart of the sun.
You know, some places are like people. Some shine and some don't.
Again, we're so happy, Uncle Albert, that Robert Sullivan is here to discuss so much meaning and myth and mystery in movies. From his new book, Cinema Symbolism 2. From David Lynch to Walt Disney, from Stanley Kubrick to all the movies from the mind of Alan Moore, and so much in between. Oh, and certainly John Carpenter. I think you'll enjoy the show, Pink, and you'll definitely be blown away by Robert's latest work. Certainly check out the episode where we discuss the first cinema symbolism, entitled Occult Messages in Movies. And certainly check out some of our past interviews with Robert on Freemasonry and the Left-Hand Path, all in our YouTube and podcast channels. For more information on Robert, please visit robertsullivan.iv.com. Movies and Jung have been a heavy topic of late on Aeon Bite Gnostic Radio. And it's not by design, oh you true seeker warriors. Perhaps, as this world darkens with madness, the collective unconscious in its synchro-mystic force just needs to be heard. And of course, movies are perhaps the last place where Westerners come together in community, as politics, religions, art, and even sports have failed us. Maybe not though, as the Archons might even fragment movies with their divide and conquer marketing, as we perhaps saw in the recent Wonder Woman flick, where people complained about press sizes, shaved armpits, and whatnot. We shall see.
I don't want any baloney, magic tricks, or psychological mumbo-jumbo.
Remember, you'll get the first part of Robert's interview. The second part available for our members at thegodabovegod.com. Please join for a paltry $5.99 a month, a fraction of the price of a movie these days. Sheesh, Yaldabaoth bless my Cody. Becoming a member really helps keep this Red Pill cafeteria open. I can't do it without you, and your support keeps this content coming and more A-list guests in the future. I really appreciate you shining crazy diamonds who support on a weekly basis. Thank you so much.
Luminous being so, not this crude matter.
After that clip of They Live at the beginning and what Robert will grant thee in our interview, I can't add much more. So let me end by quoting someone with high Sophia, Chris Knowles, where he truly encapsulates what Gnosticism is, why you are here, why we are together, finally putting on those Roddy Piper shades and taking on the god of this world and his butt slaves in the Canoma. Here it is. The fundamental difference that separates the Gnostics from their contemporaries is that, for them, their native soil is not the earth, but that lost heaven, which they keep vividly alive in their memories. They are the autochthons of another world. Hence their feeling of having fallen onto our earth like inhabitants from a distant planet, of having strayed into the wrong galaxy, and their longing to regain their true cosmic homeland, the luminous hyperworld that shimmers beyond the great nocturnal barrier. Their uprooting is not merely geographical, but planetary. And to treat them as aliens in the political or civic sense, which is what happened, could be nothing but an absurd misunderstanding, like giving a Martian a temporary residence visa. For the Gnostics, all men were in the same condition, although they were the only ones who knew it, and the human community as a whole is implicated in this universal exile, this galactic diversion that has caused us to be dumped on the mud of planet Earth.
People out here, they don't even know the outside world exists. Might as well be living on the fucking moon. There's all kinds of ghettos in the world. It's all one ghetto, man. Giant gutter in outer space.
The Gnostics must have felt this exile even more acutely in that they themselves constituted marginal communities, strangers or foreigners in the narrow sense of the term, in the heart of a whole humanity of foreigners. Here there was an historical humus which justified the Gnostic feeling of exile, of being a planetary foreigner. I am in the world but not of the world is the most basic Gnostic formula. So the problem is simple, and one begins to understand how the Gnostics saw it. Man, then, is a lifelong exile on a planet which is a prison for all mankind. He lives in a body which is a prison for the soul. He is the autochthon of a lost and invisible world.
Brother, life's a bitch. She's back in heat.
Led us to the interview with Robert Sullivan. But before, led us to another movie clip, this one from one of my favorite movies and a Gnostic gospel too, Mulholland Drive. Not surprising, since in the Twin Peaks Season 3, David Lynch and Mark Frost, so far, have gone full-blown Gnostic with their mythos. It's really the only way to survive in the desert of the real. Why? Because the empire never ended.
Man's attitude goes some ways, the way his life will be. Is that something you might agree with?
Sure.
Now, did you answer because that's what you thought I wanted to hear? Or did you think about what I said and answer because you truly believe that to be right?
I agree with what you said. Truly.
What'd I say?
That a man's attitude determines to a large extent how his life will be.
Now you will see me one more time if you do good. You'll see me 2 more times if you do bad.
This is the AM Byte interview, and with us, we're definitely delighted to have back Robert Sullivan. This time to talk about his new book, his latest book, the sequel, Cinema Symbolism 2, More Esoteric Imagery in Popular Movies. How you doing today, Robert?
Hey, Miguel. Hello, Vance. Thank you again for having me back on Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio, my 4th time to the virtual Alexandria. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Glad to have you on, and thanks for joining us too, Vance.
Oh, it's always my pleasure, Miguel. Always my pleasure.
All right. Well, tell us a little bit, Robert, about how you, the process of this book. Why did we need a sequel to the first book, which I really enjoyed, of course, and you spoke about in a previous interview?
Yeah, when I was writing Cinema Symbolism, the first book, there was movies that I wanted to talk about in that book, but alas, the book would have gone on forever. So I kind of made a determination, probably around 60% way through of writing the first book, Cinema Symbolism, that there was going to have to be a sequel. That there was just no way possible for me to include the movies that I wanted to include. For instance, when I was writing Cinema Symbolism, I took on the Lord of the Rings movies by J.R.R. Tolkien. And I wanted to talk about, I was planning to do the Narnia movies from the works of C.S. Lewis, but it wouldn't have worked. They would have just gone on and on, dragged the book out substantially. So, when I was writing the first one, I just completely concluded, well, there's no way in hell I can incorporate or talk about all the movies that I want to, analyze, dissect in this book. So, probably around 60 to 65% of the way through the first book, I started outlining the second one, and got the first book out. and I recently republished that as well. But I started writing Cinema Symbolism 2 immediately upon getting the first cinema book out, and I also was working on this work of fiction also on the side. So yeah, I mean, Cinema Symbolism 2 was just more movies that I wanted to break down that just couldn't have fit into the first book. It would have gone on forever. So hence, Cinema Symbolism was written by me and came out about a month ago.
And I'm sure the process must not be easy. I mean, people think, wow, this is about movies. I mean, we all love movies. But is it a tedious process where you just have to sit and watch a movie over and over again beyond just writing about it?
You are 100% correct, Miguel, and it can be very tedious. You have to watch the movie more than once. That is guaranteed to properly break this down. It can't be done in a movie theater. I mean, you can't sit in a darkened theater and take notes. And depending on the film and how complex it is, you are constantly going back and forth from the beginning to the end. Did something happen here that affects something later in the film, or something early happened that is being tipped off to something later in the film? And then one of the things that can really drag this out, and I am not kidding you, is I have a Blu-ray player here. I have a PlayStation 3, which plays the Blu-ray movies. And I am not kidding you. Believe me, that if you want to watch a scene from a movie, I'll be sitting there writing. I'll be like, wait a minute, did this character say this, or did this happen in the scene? I got to go check it. By the time I turn the Blu-ray on, put the disc in, I mean, it takes me like 15 minutes to pull up the scene. By the time the thing's hooked up to the internet, I get inundated with commercials and previews, and then I got to pull the menu up, and it's just so tedious to do. I can't tell you if it's an older movie and I need to watch the scene. I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, my God, I got to see this, and I can just find the scene quickly on YouTube or something. That just saves me an enormous amount of time. So yeah, it can be tedious, but it's fun to do, and I really enjoy doing it, and it's something that I really love doing anyway. But it definitely can get, when you're writing it, it's something like The Shining or Black Swan, where it's like, wait a minute, did this happen here? Did this happen here? Did I see this correctly? Did I hear this piece of dialogue correctly? And you got to go back and watch it again and again and again. Definitely can get to you after a while.
I bet. And for the listener, Robert covers, I would say, hundreds of movies and directors and really deconstructs them. So that's quite a task. So before we get into your book, well, your book does address this, is many people might be saying when reading your book is like, oh boy, we're going to use the lazy card of the Jungian collective unconscious because it's easy to do. It's all coming from a great source. But you argue very well that this is very true. And the great example you use are movies that predict 9/11. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, absolutely. I'm not a big fan or proponent of predictive programming. And why I believe that theorem by Jung is so critical is because inevitably, and I've talked to people who say, oh, I didn't intend that, or, I didn't include that intentionally, yet there it is. I was on a show in California, and I had a screenwriter call in and said, he agreed with the work. He didn't dislike the work. He said, but I never intended this. And the collective unconscious is really sort of an explanation, and it's a legitimate explanation, is to where some of this material could be coming from if it's not intentionally placed. Do not get me wrong. I do believe in many cases it is intentionally placed. I mean, that's the whole premise of the book. But like with the 9/11 material, I mean, it's just really difficult for me to believe, that the Wachowski siblings or, Mel Gibson and Roland Emmerich had forewarning of this. That's just, I would just need to see much more evidence of this than that's out there. But sure, you get into, some people go back on the 9/11 stuff. 20, 30 years, to me, that's just too far removed. Although you do get into the stuff with Escape from New York, where you clearly have the plane going into lower Manhattan. You have the lone gunman. Now, that's very close to the incident. That's from March of 2001, where this was a spinoff of the X-Files, where the lone gunman pilot episode predicted terrorists hijacking airplanes and crashing them into the World Trade Center. I mean, you can't make that up. Then you get into, of course, the two granddaddies of them all. The biggie is, of course, The Matrix, where Neo Anderson's passport expires on September 11th, 2001. I mean, you've got the entire date there. And of course, that movie is seminal to this whole idea of, awakening to a new age, awakening to consciousness, destruction of the old world, destruction of the Hylic world. You kind of see this echoed in Fight Club, which also came out in 1999, and a sort of rebirth to gnosis, to rebirth to consciousness. And many have argued that this was sort of the hallmarks of 9/11, the end of the old age, the start of the new age, the procession of the equinoxes, something akin to that. So you have Neo, who is this Valentinian Christ-like savior, awakening mankind, and of course he is basically dies and resurrects on 9/11/01. That's very fascinating, and I mean, of course, you can't make that up. Also, that's right there in the film. And then the other one that is really startling is the Patriot with Mel Gibson, where it's during the opening credits. And again, this movie came out a year before 9/11. I want to say it opened in the summer of 2000, June, July of 2000, where during the opening credits, Mel Gibson's character, I believe his name is Benjamin Martin, is making a wooden chair in his barn. And he puts the chair up on a scale, and the chair weighs exactly 9 pounds, 11 ounces. And then he puts it on the ground and sits on it, and it comes crashing down. Again, just absolutely fascinating. And like I said in the book, I'm not really necessarily a big proponent of predictive programming, but clearly this is coming from somewhere. So I propose in the book that the collective unconscious, Plato's theory of forms must play a role here.
Agreed. And you say you're not a fan of predictive programming, but I mean, we do know that the CIA and the military definitely joins with Hollywood to give us stuff like, I don't know, Top Gun and so forth. I mean, they are in there, but some researchers like Jan Irving and Jay Dyer and others are very. They propose that it's even deeper, that Hollywood, many movies are really propaganda to control us, to get us ready for certain things, to social engineer us. What do you think about that, Robert?
Well, I think to a degree that is somewhat correct. I don't know if I go so far as they go, because to say that Hollywood had 9/11 pre-knowledge or something, that's not really something I buy into. But certainly you get into stuff. I mean, propaganda is absolutely true. I mean, I even talk about Yankee Doodle Dandy with Jimmy Cagney. Is essentially pro-World War II propaganda. There's no question about it. And you get into the Transformer movie with the railgun. That was absolutely true, where that was being used to introduce the world that the Navy, I believe, had developed an electromagnetic railgun. So it does occur. I don't deny that, and it is there. But I definitely believe that so some of it, going back 20, 30 years, that, Back to the Future was predicting 9/11. That's something I really don't buy into, or things like that. I mean, but as it gets closer to the movie, the movie's is prophecy. There is something to this, but I definitely go down the route of the collective unconscious. But I'm aware, and I, don't fully throw it out the window. I mean, clearly when you get into the things like with Transformers, with the railgun, Yankee Doodle Dandy with Jimmy Cagney, there is some propaganda there, no doubt about it.
What do you think, Vance? Question, or what's your take on this?
Of course, it's a fascinating field, and I've pondered myself, what the source of this is. I figured that maybe the writers had more to do with it than directors. You know how we always, Robert, credit directors for the whole movie. You know what I mean?
Right. Oh, absolutely. I think it's more of like a collective, endeavor. I think you get writers. I got you directors. You've got screenwriters or producers as well, as the word I'm looking for. So in some instances it's definitely could be a collaborative effort, and I think it also has to do with the level of sophistication of these people, because you see it in some movies where it's just overwhelming, and then you watch other movies and you don't see anything. So there is a level of sophistication with it. I mean, and it's certain aspects. Some movies, the people do it, and then they make another movie and they won't use anything, or they'll do it in one movie and then they won't do it in another, but they'll do it in another movie, but it'll be different symbolism to convey a different message. So it absolutely can be sophisticated and a deep topic, and this is one of the real reasons that one of the real talking points that I harp on in both the books, and even in the Masonic book that I wrote. It's really context. it's context, context, context. It's, what's the underlying movie about? Is it, secret societies? Is it alchemical? Is it Gnostic? Is it, comparative religion? To me, once that's unlocked, that's when this stuff becomes much more, easier to diagnose than, just sitting there and just saying, oh, well, this is that, this is that. It segregates it from being an interpretation to fit a kind of predetermined narrative to really dissecting the movie and trying to discern what these filmmakers are trying to tell me on an esoteric level.
You think the Masons are involved here? Because there's so many of them. So they're probably in Hollywood, I'm wondering.
Oh, absolutely. It's interesting that you bring that up because, you do, especially in the golden age of Hollywood, you have tons of Hollywood directors, and the founders of the movie studios were Freemasons, and, Clark Gable and John Wayne and Douglas Fairbanks Sr. and Jr. I mean, you really have a whole coterie of Masons in Hollywood. I was on other shows talking about this, and this is, interesting. It's where Jimmy Kimmel Live is filmed, is the old Beverly Hills Hollywood Masonic Lodge. And Kimmel, it's right next to the El Capitan Theater. And Kimmel has joked, this happened about a year or so ago, maybe a year and a half now. Kimmel had actually joked that there was this set of subterranean tunnels running under the Masonic Temple leading to the Hollywood studios, where the actors and directors could just, leave the studio and use these subterranean tunnels to reach the Masonic Lodge. And sure enough, this actually turned out to be true. There is this network of tunnels under the El Capitan Theater next to this Masonic temple. Unfortunately, the tunnels have subsequently collapsed and are in such a state of disrepair that they can't be navigated anymore. But apparently this was true, that the Masons were using this nexus, or the set of tunnels under Hollywood to go from the studios to this Masonic Lodge. And you will clearly find a Masonic influence. I mean, I have a whole chapter in Cinema Symbolism too called Freemasonry and Popular Culture, where, you'll see Masonry on such shows as, Sleepy Hollow. I've talked about in lots of my books, the National Treasure film being a reenactment of a Masonic ritual. So yeah, I mean, there is definitely Freemasonry in Hollywood. I think that's pretty irrefutable at this point.
And something that should be noted, too, is that it's much more complicated than that. For example, the last Ridley Scott movie, Alien Resurrection, I haven't seen it, but people told me it was just a mess. And that happens when a movie gets, producers get involved, things get cut out. It's very complex. So whatever esoteric message Ridley Scott might have wanted ended up just being a sort of a bad slasher film that he lost it. But, and also, putting to rest, Robert, and you mentioned this in your book, you don't see Hollywood controlled by the Illuminati, do you?
No, not really. Unless you mean, no, I really don't buy into that. I mean, you certainly have. I mean, I guess if you define the word Illuminati just to mean an elite class, I mean, I guess that's sort of the way of the world almost. But I mean, I don't see some sort of Luciferian, satanic, that this is the words that oftentimes get tossed around with the Illuminati. Some sort of satanic, sinister, hell-bent group to mind control and to poison the minds of youth and, turn the world upside down. No, I don't really, unfortunately, see that going on in Hollywood. I mean, and it's like I said in other shows, I probably have even mentioned this on your show at some point in time in one of the past episodes. To me, a lot of this, the incorporation of this esoterica is really akin to, like an architect incorporating sacred geometry into a building. It heightens the building. It makes it more sublime. It's, it gives it this divine presence almost. And same sort of thing almost with some of this esoteric and arcana that's being placed in film. It's really turning the film, and I know I've used this term before, basically into modern day mythology. So it's, like Star Wars. I mean, I'm in Generation X. I mean, there isn't any person in my generation who doesn't know of that. And again, it has to do with the incorporation of this comparative religion study, the Campbell monomyth. And these guys like Lucas, they know what the hell they're doing. So, I guess the point I'm trying to make is I don't necessarily see a sinister hand behind all this all the time. I mean, I guess there could be, but, you get into the breakdown of this stuff. I mean, like I said, some people will tell you, you look at the template of Washington or something, because there was really no transparency with it, it's automatically default evil. And it's the same thing with this movie Symbolism, and it's just not an argument that I buy into.
I'd like to go down your book and go by directors before we get into some of the nitty-gritty movies. And
Sure.
at first, having a little fun, tell us about this great Gnostic master, up there with Valentinus and Simon Magus, up there with the Wachowski siblings. Tell us about the great Gnostic sage Ed Wood.
Oh well, Ed Wood is great, and what I like about Ed Wood is, and I've really have said, I think I've said this on your show before, is, you know, what I really like about Ed Wood is, I mean, I think he's really made one of the sort of premier movies if you want to watch a Gnostic demiurge in action. You know, you get movies such as The Matrix and The Matrix Reloaded, where you get the architect showing up. And then, of course, Christoph and The Truman Show. I mean, these are, you know, if you're familiar with the Gnostic theology, these are a little, you know, obvious to the viewer. And they certainly are great examples of the demiurge. But I just love the Bela Lugosi scientist character in Glenn or Glenda. I mean, there you have it. The guy who was just, you know, pulling the strings of mankind, keeping them submerged in the material world. I mean, he admits that he's a screw up and that he's constantly making mistakes about the sexes and he just can't get it right. And, you know, I mean, I've always said to people, I mean, if you really, you know, it's really a great example of an early, it's really a great example of an early film that presents a Gnostic demiurge on film. I mean, I guess you could turn to Metropolis by Fritz Lang would be another one with the Fessenden character. But I just really think, I mean, you have the whole idea of Lugosi as this sub-deity, I mean, who's just a complete screw-up. And he just, you know, runs the universe, you know, the planet Earth imperfectly. I mean, he's constantly lamenting that, you know, I keep screwing up the sexes and I don't know what I'm doing. And he's got the little, you know, chemistry set there where he's trying to tinker with mankind. And I just think that movie is just such a great example of a Gnostic demiurge in film. And it's again another example. This ties into what we were talking about at the beginning of the show of, I'm 100% convinced. I mean, I've read tons of material on Ed Wood and I've seen all the documentaries on him. And this is clearly a man who probably didn't know Gnosticism from a hole in the ground. And again, this would be to me something coming straight out of Jung's collective unconscious, Plato's theory of forms. I might have mentioned this the last time I was on with you. I said, you know, or maybe another show, if you got in a time machine today and went back to 1953 when that movie was being made, and you walked up to Ed Wood and said, "Hey, why did you cast Lugosi as this Gnostic demiurge?" I mean, I don't think he would know what the hell you're talking about. But there it is, Bela Lugosi as you know, your sort of Manichaean puppet master, pulling the strings of mankind, forever screwing up, yet constantly trying to get it right there in Glenn or Glenda.
Exactly. Do you have a question, Vance? Are you streaming Glenn or Glenda on your computer as we speak?
You know, I've never seen that. I saw the one with Bela Lugosi in that was filmed in some little housing development or whatever. I forget what it was. He just kind of sauntered around. But
yeah, that's Plan 9 from Outer Space.
Oh, he was that? You know, yeah, I've seen that a couple of times. My memory's kind of starting to fail me. What's in Plan 9 from Outer Space that's esoteric?
No, that was Lugosi's last movie. That actually has historical importance. Before Lugosi died, Wood filmed a few scenes with no plot in mind of just Lugosi running around this graveyard in his Dracula costume. The house that he's coming in and out of was a man named Tor Johnson, who was this overweight professional wrestler. He turns up in Wood's movies as well. He's most known as the character of Lobo, which means wolf. In the movie Bride of the Monster, and this was a character he resurrects in the movie called Night of the Ghouls. And then he's in Plan 9. He plays a character named Daniel Clay. He's a police inspector. But the house that you see Lugosi, you know, sort of walking in and out of and shuffling around actually belonged to Tor Johnson, the professional wrestler. But I wouldn't say there's really any esoterica in Plan 9. It's pretty much a remake of a movie called The Day the Earth Stood Still, although Wood, as he always does, screws it up and and makes it where the space aliens are more freaked out by the humans than the humans are of the space aliens. It's a funny film to watch.
Well, that's pretty insightful. Aliens,
Elvira.
aliens would be scared of us, the stuff we do. So kudos.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you get into it the day the Earth stood still, where Klaatu comes down and everyone's in awe, and he's dictating to the humans, you got to abandon, your tribal warfare and stop polluting the environment, or else we will destroy you. And all the Earthlings are in all of this guy. Well, the guy in Plan 9 shows up. His name is Eros. I mean, and the Earthlings are like, who the hell is this guy? Just get the hell out of here. We're not interested in anything you say. He winds up. I mean, the Earthlings' reaction is, you'll see no scene like this where the space alien warns the Earthlings that they're trying to destroy the universe, and the Earthlings' reaction to this is to call him, what's he say to it? He calls him, an idiot, and punches the space alien out. That's the reaction from him, and it's just hilarious that the Earthlings could care less about what the space aliens are trying to do. And of course, this is sort of a reversal from the day the Earth stood still.
I think it's pretty realistic. I think humanity would go, well, how many followers do you have on Facebook? We're busy with our wars and all this stuff. Did Putin send you here? So I think Ed Wood was pretty insightful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the space aliens land are trying to dictate morality, and the Earthlings' reaction is to punch the guy out. I mean, I think that says it all.
Agreed. So moving on to a mutual favorite of ours, David Lynch. And I know you said in your book that you're going to work on the new Twin Peaks season in your next book, because obviously it's ongoing right now. But I just wanted to know your personal thoughts. What do you think of the new season? Have you had a chance to see it, Robert?
No, I haven't. I haven't watched any of it, actually. What I was originally planning to do was, when I was writing the David Lynch chapter, I was planning on taking on Twin Peaks, the original one, but I just was running out of time, and it would have just slowed the book down. So I just cut it out. I just didn't take it on. I haven't seen the original Twin Peaks at all. And my plan on this is, right now I'm working on my first work of fiction. So once I get this done, I'm going to start it on Cinema Symbolism 3, where I'm going to actually go back and sit down and watch the first Twin Peaks and then follow it up with the second Twin Peaks. So unfortunately, I can't answer any questions right now about the new Twin Peaks, unfortunately.
Well, then we'll discuss it in your next interview, hopefully, because I'm sure you'll have some great insights. So for the listener, what about Lynch himself? Can we say that he has been influenced by the occult or the esoterica, Robert?
Oh, I think so. I mean, I definitely think so. I mean, I break down 4 movies of Lynch in the book. I got into Blue Velvet. I got into Dune, which is really one of the best examples of the Campbell monomyth. I mean, that really has it all. And of course, Lost Highway and Mulholland Drive, which are almost, to me, those last 2 are almost extensions of the same movie. I mean, almost the same movie. One in dealing with the masculine and one dealing with the feminine. I mean, I absolutely am convinced that, I mean, for me, those movies were by far and away what I would call heavy lifting. I mean, he is incredibly complex. You get into something like Lost Highway, I mean, there really is no definitive answer to it. I mean, but that's being intentionally done. Lynch is just trying to intentionally, cloud the waters and make them so murky that you can't that there is no one interpretation of that movie that just holds solid. I mean, you can look at it in many different ways. I mean, I think there are themes in both of that and Mulholland Drive that kind of remain steady, with Lost Highway as well, that, you kind of can pin down, but I mean, you're just dealing with very complex themes in those movies. You're dealing with a lot of, kind of Gnostic-esque ideas of, journeys of self-enlightenment, the receiving of wisdom. I mean, Lynch was a whole chapter I took on those 4 movies, but I would definitely say out of all the chapters in the book, that was by far and away the most difficult to write, just because there is so much going on, and he leads you down a rabbit hole, and it turns out this could be the case, but it's not here. And are they alchemical? Maybe this is sort of, but this one he flirts with it, but not really. Very, very complex material.
Oh, agreed. I mean, Mulholland Drive is one of my all-time favorite movies, and I watched it long before I knew about Gnosticism, and it blew me away. And then as I started studying the occult, it made a lot of sense. But there are things we can discern of David Lynch style, and you bring it up in your book. And one of them is called transcendental irony. Tell us about that, Robert.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This was I'm a fan of, and I cite to him a few times. I quote him directly. I'm a fan of a guest of your show named Eric Wilson, and I think I think he does a real great job on this. And that is, kind of Lynch likes to sort of do this stuff, but it's almost with this cruel sense of irony that's tongue in cheek. It's very hard to describe, but it's where you look at something like Lost Highway is sort of a great example of this, where and you can find it even in Mulholland Drive as well. But I really like it in Lost Highway, where you have the Fred Madison character, who is sort of this evil, sort of, son of a bitch. He's this cruel guy. And this is something, I've heard you talk about before. This is sort of like negative theology. It's the Sethians, where the more evil he does, and this is where the whole Mystery Man ties into this. The more evil he does, the more closer to God he becomes, where he winds up committing murder. You have the whole Mystery Man guy who's sort of this walking personification of evil, but it's almost sort of mirroring the Book of Enoch, where it's divine evil. And he, even the Mystery Man says it. He says, evil only comes where it's welcome. And he lets the Mystery Man in. He's in his house, but he's standing in front of him. And Fred Madison winds up committing this murder of his wife, which is Renee. And he goes to jail, but then he morphs into this other character named Pete Dayton, where he, becomes this great guy. And he's let loose from the jail, and he's sort of this complete polar opposite. And this is what I'm talking about with transcendental irony. It's this idea that he's this evil bastard, but winds up becoming this great guy. And it's very ironic. And you kind of find this also with Mulholland Drive, where, you have the Diane Selwyn character who's trying to become, like the Betty Elms character, who is sort of this perfect existence, much akin to the Peter Dayton character. And it's, kind of the committing of evil, the murdering of the character Camilla Rhodes, that she has this sort of Betty Elms-like reality created. And it's the same thing in Lost Highway. One's masculine, one's feminine. And it's very interesting. And I love both movies. I think both movies are just great. But, you are absolutely correct. There's a ton going on inside those. I love it how in the Mulholland Drive, where if you pay real close attention to this, where in the dream sequence, the Betty Elm sequence, everything is there that's in the real world of Diane Swellen, only it's tweaked a little bit. It's one of those movies you got to watch over and over and over again to pick up on this, where there'll be something going on in the in the one sequence that turns up later in the other sequence, but it's always nuanced. It's always a little different. And I really love the way Lynch does that. And he really kind of experiments with this in Lost Highway, where the Fred Madison character turns up in the Peter Dayton sequence as the Robert Loggia character, who's sort of the evil, kind of manipulative, controlling mafiosa character, which ultimately in the end turns Pete back into Fred. He can't get out of it. So he winds up committing the murder, and then he sort of reverts back, quite literally, back to the other character. But yeah, Lynch is fascinating, and tons going on inside those movies. Like I said, by far and away in Cinema Symbolism 2, that was by far the most complex chapter to write.
It's a great chapter. And yes, I see all of Gnosticism in Mulholland Drive. You've got Rita and Betty, who are sort of the Sophia characters. And in the Gnostic text, Sophia sort of goes crazy inside the material world. She splits off into different characters, and she's very flawed. She's not this lofty goddess that others might think. And of course, you've got the Demiurge character with the midget, who also plays the Demiurge character in Twin Peaks, and then the cowboy. He's a fascinating one. What do you think about the cowboy?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you have it's you got the little guy there, Mr. Roke, who is sort of like the charge of the Hollywood Illuminati. Right. He's the guy who's running the whole show. For all this talk about Hollywood Illuminati, there it is on screen. There you got the guy who's shutting down the movies, selecting the actors and actresses. You got to do this, you got to do that, you got to play by the rules, or else you're out of business, as the one director finds out. But he clearly echoes a Gnostic demiurge. Also, he's the puppet master, who is manipulating the people to satisfy his own narrow ego. And absolutely. I mean, yeah, you've got the whole split with Betty Elms and Diane Selwyn, and then the cowboy character is, to me, he's sort of like the light bearer. He's sort of like the wisdom provider for Diane, because I love it when the director, I can't remember his name, I think it's Jason, I can't remember what the full character's name is, but when he goes out to the ranch to meet the cowboy, this is where the cowboy is sort of like the mouth of the Hollywood Illuminati, and he's saying, hey, you're going to play by our rules or you're not going to play at all. And he really reads the riot act to him. But then he gets into this, he splits off and then goes into this dialogue, and it doesn't make sense, where he says, if you see me once, you'll do good. And he says, but if you see me twice, you'll have done bad. And I am 100% convinced that he's actually, at that point in time, talking to Diane Selwyn. This is, of course, Naomi Watts, the other Naomi Watts character, who's dreaming. Because if you pay attention to it, she's dreaming and she sees him twice. She sees him standing in her door frame where he says, "Hey, baby doll, time to wake up. You're dreaming." And then if you continue to watch the film, he's mingling at the back in the background of the poolside party. And this is where Camilla really humiliates her. So he's seen twice more times in the film. And of course, this is heralding or anticipating or saying that Diane has done bad by putting up the contract on Camilla Rhodes. So when the cowboy is speaking at that point, and he's like the light bearer, he's the wisdom provider. When he approaches the Hollywood director, the light flicks on, the little light bulb is flickering on, saying, "Here comes light, here comes knowledge." And then as he turns and walks away, the light flickers off. So that's Lynch's way of saying, well, here's the the light bearer, as it were. But when he gets into the dialogue about seeing me once, seeing me twice, he's talking to the sleeping Diane Selwyn character, not to the cowboy, or not to the movie director at that point in time.
Wow, that's amazing. Robert.
Yes.
You might be able to solve a 37-year-old mystery for me involving David Lynch. What in heaven's name does Eraserhead mean?
Oh, well, I appreciate you asking me. To be honest with you, 100%, I've never seen the movie. So I'm going to have to take a pass on that. When Cinema Symbolism 3 comes out, you can re-ask me.
Oh, no, the archetypes, the collective unconsciousness refuses to relieve me. What's the chances?
Just one more year, Vance. One more year.
Yeah, I have. So out of all the, I've seen the original Twin Peaks TV show, pieces of it, but it's been years since I looked at it. I have not watched any of the new Twin Peaks on Showtime. I believe it's on. But this is something I definitely plan on. And the other Lynch movie I want to do is the one with Nicolas Cage and Laura Dern, Wild at Heart. But I haven't seen that in years. Like I said, this was all stuff I kind of planned out for CS2, but again, just would have dragged the book out, would have tacked on more pages. I'd probably still be writing it at this point. So I'm definitely going to probably plan out, the arcane noir of David Lynch 2.0 when Cinema Symbolism 3 comes out.
Well, we look forward to that. So why don't we move on to another great esoteric and sometimes surreal director, not so much, and that is Stanley Kubrick. As far as your research says, Robert, was he influenced by esoteric or the occult?
Well, you certainly find it in two of his movies. You find it, and it's definitely, I don't know if I'd say occult, but it's definitely esoteric devices he's using. And Kubrick's really interesting because Kubrick's a great example to me of someone who knows what he's doing, and he uses this stuff selectively. I mean, he knows when to use it and know when's not to use it, and he knows that using it in one film, he doesn't repeat himself. No pun intended. He uses different devices in different films. And the two movies that I really broke down in Cinema Symbolism 2 was The Shining and Eyes Wide Shut. I mean, to me, these are really the two premier Kubrick movies that really contain the most esoteric in them, which is, The Shining, which is the whole notion of the Jack Nicholson character being this repeating reincarnated character of Charles Grady or Delbert Grady. This is left unknown. And it's this vicious reincycling reincarnation cycle going on inside the Overlook Hotel. So Kubrick, to bombard your subconscious mind with this, is just constantly repeating numbers and having characters say lines back to each other. And This is all being done to just denote this reincarnation cycle going on inside the Overlook Hotel. So, for example, one of the numbers that he likes to repeat is the number 12. And you get this in the room 237. If you add up the numbers 237, you get the number 12. The hotel is Katie K12. The Wendy and Danny take 12 turns in the hedge maze. Jack throws the tennis ball against the wall 12 times. Jack Torrance hits the door with the axe 12 times. There are 2 times shown on the screen, 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. Add 8 plus 4 to get the number 12. So he likes to bombard you with these repeating numbers. 42 is another one. Danny and Wendy are watching the Summer of 42 movie in the Overlook. Danny has the number 42 on his little T-shirt when he's standing in front of the mirror talking to Tony at the beginning. If you multiply 2 times 3 times 7, 237 again, you get the number 42. And he's bombarding your subconscious mind with this to really denote and symbolize this endless reincarnation cycle going on inside the Overlook Hotel. He uses esoteric imagery as well in Eyes Wide Shut. And this is what I call in the movie sort of Kubrick's illuministic impulse, because this is really a great movie to see the puppet masters on screen, where you have this clearly the secret society who's into the sex magics, who's into the occult rituals. I love it in the movie. Kubrick clearly knows what he's doing here. You have the whole idea of the magic circle with witchcraft, where the red cloak master of ceremonies, you have the naked women denoting sex magic, forming the magic circle. The master of ceremonies is sort of consecrating the magic circle with incense. He's doing this counterclockwise. This is critical in witchcraft, especially left-hand path sorcery. This is known as what is known as Widdershins, casting the magic circle backwards, denoting black magic. These are your evil puppet masters. The Sidney Pollack character even tells the Tom Cruise character this, hey, you don't mess around with these guys. This is the real deal here. But what I really like is he doesn't use, this is what really impresses me with Stanley Kubrick is he doesn't use the repetition in The Shining that he does in Eyes Wide Shut. He uses esoteric imagery, but it's of a different kilter, or of a different thread. In this, he uses the Christmas lights, where if you watch the movie, just every scene is inundated with these gaudy Christmas lights. Every scene, and you'll find it, where the prostitute is over ODing, with the child pornography scheme, with the pedophilia, with the prostitution. And what Kubrick is really trying to say here is, he's sort of presenting this around the holiday season and saying these are sort of the ills of mankind. These are sort of the degradations of mankind: the child prostitution, pornography, the sex ring, drug use, drug abuse. And this is constantly being inundated or sequenced with these gaudy, over-the-top Christmas lights. But then when the Tom Cruise character gets to the mansion where the Illuminati is, the Christmas lights are gone. There is no trace of Christmas in the mansion at all. And what Kubrick is saying, well, this evil here is nothing compared to the ones that plague everyday mankind. This is the real deal. This is where the real evil dwells. This is under the rainbow, as it were. And it's a great esoteric cinematic device he uses there. And I just love the way he just implements that. I think it's very masterful. I think it's very esoteric and very occult.
Agreed. And going back to Lynch, I see him as one of his core ethos is that there really is a cosmic battle between good and evil, especially if you start watching Twin Peaks. I think that's what all his movies convey. But also, and this relates to The Shining, and especially with Lynch's Blue Velvet and certainly Mulholland Drive, is that, and the same with The Shining, is that things may seem okay in society and civilization, but underneath there is a great corruption and a great evil. Is that what you see, Robert?
Oh, absolutely. This is your alchemical Negredo, which is always present. And yeah, absolutely, that there is this chaotic, dark world underneath the shining sunlight. No question. You have that in Blue Velvet. I just love that opening sequence there where they're showing you the 1950s America of Dwight Eisenhower, and the old man has the stroke, and then he goes to the beetles, these black beetles beneath the surface, scurrying around, making all this motion, and then the Kyle MacLachlan character goes on this sort of quest for knowledge. And of course, if you're going to go on the quest for knowledge, you have the light side. But if you're going to have the light side, it's always counterbalanced with the dark side. And in enters the alchemical Negredo, the transitioner character, the Frank Booth character, who is your walking darkness. I mean, even when he walks into the room, he says, then he say something as "night has come" or "it's dark now" or something. And absolutely, there is always this Manichaean theme of beneath the surface, and Lynch does it very well. As even in the Betty Elm sequence in Mulholland Drive, you have the introduction of the rope character, of the muscle men. This is the girl. You're going to do it our way or else. And in The Shining, the same thing. I say in the analysis in the book, the hotel to me is sort of the alchemical Negredo. This is the blackening of the Jack Torrance's soul. This is what's helped turn your alchemical Mercurius almost. That's turning him into this dark evil figure. And absolutely in Blue Velvet, I mean, that's just a great movie to see it in, where you have the scurrying beetles. And I like it where at the very beginning of that, I mean, this is just so great. I mean, it's very symbolic where, you have the Blue Velvet song being sung, you have the firemen going down the street. I mean, this is clearly a harken back to 1950s Eisenhower America, and the old man, the hose tightens, and he has the stroke or heart attack, and he's laying there, and if you're paying attention to it, he's holding the hose, in between his legs. And the little Jack Russell Terrier starts barking at it and biting at the water. And if you look at it, it's the old man who's laying there kind of dying. It looks like he's ejaculating all over this sort of beautiful landscape. And what Lynch is trying to tell you is, and then they cut to the beetles, that are scurrying around, is, that this, beautiful, pristine life is just completely boring. You got to have the dark side in order to live life. And then, of course, the Kyle MacLachlan character goes on this quest for gnosis and, really accomplishes it only through the introduction of the Frank Booth character.
Vince, you got any questions about Kubrick?
Well, my head's spinning, but 2001 always comes to mind. That's my favorite Kubrick movie. Do you think there was anything with the monolith and the future of mankind? And could it be that all these cinema things are some sort of portal to the other unseen world for us and humankind?
Well, when you get into 2001, it's interesting because, I mean, the movies definitely could be a portal. I mean, into perhaps like, we were talking about earlier, as some sort of predictive, collective, unconscious mechanism. I mean, this is something I talk about. It's controversial. I say in the book, when it comes to cinema as prophecy, that if we're gonna start breaking down the idea of the notion, the Jungian Plato notion of the collective unconscious theory of forms, if this is all inherited, could this be some sort of predictive mechanism as well? I think that's very interesting. Granted, it's controversial, but if you look at it, from a psychological standpoint, since movies are, one of the ultimate artistic expressions, could these things somehow be triggering some sort of predictive mechanism inside of mankind and be some sort of portal to the future, or at least anticipatory portal? Yeah, I mean, I think that's very possible. I talk about that in the book. 2001.
How about direct?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah, how about
just real quickly I'll just wrap up with 2001. It's something I talk about just briefly in the first book, but I mean, it's kind of like this reversal that Kubrick does. I mean, this was based on the novel by Arthur C. Clarke, where I mean, you have the Kubrick movie with that one where, you had this sort of reversal where in that one you have the apotheosis of mankind kind of becoming godlike, where in The Shining you have this reversal where mankind descends into total savagery. So I kind of like that reversal that Kubrick does between 2001 and The Shining. But 2001 is a very complex movie. I mean, that again is almost akin to Lynch's Lost Highway. There's probably not one definitive explanation for it. I mean, it can be interpreted many different ways.
How about the directive aspect of movies? So predictive would imply that, okay, the movie had some sort of prescience and knew what was going to happen. But I think I've seen some evidence that movies are actually directing the direction, that's a nice phrase, from the Department of the Redundancy Department. The movies are actually guiding mankind. Like, look at the 1950s science fiction. All of a sudden we have the space program. Look at Star Trek and the things that, the NASA actually admits to being inspired by What do you think about that? The other direction where movies are actually guiding mankind.
Yeah, that's a real deep argument. It's sort of almost like life imitating art, imitating life. It's certainly possible. Yeah, I mean, you absolutely get into the sort of this hand in glove sort of thing where the movies are reflecting what's going on in society, but then maybe society's also turning towards what the movies are putting out. I like the 1950s science fiction movies because they all have this is something I talked about in the first movie book. This is very interesting because a lot of those movies, the science fiction movies from the 1950s, are twofold. They are, number one is the whole space alien invasion movie, such as The Day the Earth Stood Still, and really the one that comes to mind is, the invasion of the Body Snatchers. Those things are all allegories for the Red Menace, where the space alien is, or the aliens are representing communist Russia, creeping into Eisenhower's America and, creating clones, and things aren't as they seem. And maybe we're being undermined by the East. And a lot of those space alien movies reflect that. And then at this exact same time, you have going on the proliferation of the nuclear arms race between, the Cold War. And this is always being reflected in the giant insect movie. Where, them or Mantis or, the greatest one of all, Godzilla, where the mutation caused by these nuclear experimentation as a result of the Cold War is causing, chaos to ensue, where, the nuclear radiation is always causing some sort of mutation to occur, causing giant crickets or spiders to run amok on the countryside. So you have these two deep symbolic undercurrents going on in these 1950 bug movies or space alien invasion movies, both representing the Red Menace, and then sort of the side effect to them of nuclear proliferation, the arms race, which is being reflected in the giant insect movie of the 1950s. That's a fascinating study. This is something I took on in the very first cinema book I wrote.
And rounding out or finishing up with Stanley Kubrick, and it should be mentioned, what are your thoughts on The Shining being Kubrick's sort of a slap or hinting at the government about the fake moon landing?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm 100% sold on this one or not. It's interesting, and it's certainly in there. The whole idea that he faked the moon land. The idea is that whether men went to the moon or not in 1969, it's very possible that they went, but they couldn't film on the moon. They didn't have the technology. So Kubrick was the guy who filmed them, the guys in the astronaut suits just jumping around. And this is all just a giant soundstage somewhere. This is actually mirrored in a James Bond movie. I believe it's Diamonds Are Forever, where James Bond actually breaks into a top secret movie studio in Las Vegas where they're faking the moon landing.
Yes.
And they're jumping around and whatever. This is where Kubrick, where the little boy's Danny's playing with the toys, and then he stands up with the Apollo 11 rocket on his sweater. And this is, of course, symbolizing the moon launch or the rocket launch. And then he goes into room 237. I believe in King's novel, it's room 213 or perhaps 217. It's a different number. And the theory is that he changed it, or one of the reasons that he changed it to 237 is because that's the distance from the Earth to the moon in the late 1970s was 237,000 miles. So this was Kubrick's way of tipping off the world that, hey, I'm the guy who filmed the secret moon landing footage. I guess it's possible. I'm not 100% certain of it. I talk about it in the book. I'm certainly aware of the theory. Very interesting, but for me personally, I'm not quite there yet.
Hey, Robert, I have some inside information for you. I knew the guy that invented the camera technology that they used to film on the moon. They used Kevlar film. It's very interesting.
That's fascinating.
So they did have it, and there's more to that story, but for some other time.
Yeah, well, the theory is that they could have gone to the moon. Some people say, oh, they didn't go at all. But they could have definitely launched, have landed on the moon. The theory is, well, maybe they went, but they just couldn't film there. But, or they didn't go at all. That's another theory. But like I said, I'm aware of the symbolism in The Shining. I'm just not, I talk about it in the book, but for me, I'm more interested in the repetition that Kubrick does. That to me is really the true arcana of that film.
So I think that's all the time. I think this interview will come out in the middle of July, but okay. Tell us about why we're having a little bit of synchronicity doing this interview today, Robert.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you got to throw this in. When this interview airs, we are recording this interview today on Saturday, June 24th, 2017. And as we are recording this, this is the 300th anniversary of the formation of the Grand Lodge in London, England. Today is the birthday of modern day Freemasonry. It came onto the scene officially. I mean, I know, there were lodges operating in Europe and in Scotland and these medieval craftsman guilds, much before that. But Freemasonry officially comes into the history books on June 24th, 1717. And we have some synchronicity today when we were recording this, as today is the June 24th, 2017, which is the 300th anniversary of Freemasonry. And of course, as you know, and probably the listeners know, I am a Freemason. I am a Blue Lodge Mason, as well as a Scottish Rite Freemason here in Baltimore, Maryland. So yeah, very synchronicity in its full effect, and great spending the day with you talking about cinema symbolism and cinema symbolism 2 and Freemasonry. And absolutely. Couldn't have picked a better day to do it.
Agreed, and thank you very much. Very stimulating conversation. Thanks for being here, Vance, and I think that's all the time.
My pleasure.
And that's all the time we have today, and thank you very much for coming on, Robert, and discussing your new and wonderful book, Cinema Symbolism 2.
Oh, thank you, Miguel, for having me on. I really appreciate it. I love coming on Aeon Bite. Like I said, you're one of my favorite shows, and thank you so much. I really enjoyed it, and anytime you want to have me on, my pleasure to come back.
Oh, we look forward to it. Talk about Lynch and all the other good stuff.
Absolutely.
And there you have it, my beloved truth seekers. The first part of our interview with Robert Sullivan on his new book, Cinema Symbolism 2, more esoteric imagery in popular movies. In our second part, we will get deeper, talking about the occultism of Walt Disney and Disney movies, and deep into the esotericism of Peter Jackson, John Carpenter, and other directors, as well as the films based on the work of Alan Moore. We'll also deal with the alchemical symbolism in spaghetti westerns and other genres, and Freemason-themed flicks like The Ninth Gate. It's a Pandora's box of gnosis in the second half, all by becoming a member at thegodaboveGod.com. Please join for a mere $5.99 a month. Beyond full interviews, you'll get more than 350 episodes with the best and brightest in Gnosticism, Western esoterica, and free thought. You'll also be invited to our Inner Sanctum of Gnosis Facebook group, where Robert will be there to answer your questions. And many past guests hang out there too. And I'm always there to answer your questions or issues too. Becoming a member really keeps this Red Pill Cafeteria open. If this is not your late night double feature picture show, become a patron at Patreon, where you will get some of the same benefits. Or maybe a few shekels here or there via PayPal or the US mail. I can't do it without you. We are truly tapping into the liberating gifts of the collective unconscious, this and the rest of 2017. And Sophia's making movies on location, as Dire Straits sang, that cosmic roller girl. Thank you for being here with me on the set. Hello and goodbye as always.